The crowd shifted restlessly, murmurs rising as anticipation gave way to confusion. Lloyd Frontera stepped into the dueling arena, holding a shovel. At first, no one said anything. Then the whispers began. Was it some kind of bluff? A joke? But the longer they stared, the clearer it became. He was actually going to fight with it. Neumann's eye twitched as he stared at the absurd weapon in Lloyd's hands. A shovel. He clenched his jaw, visibly irritated. From the stands, Javier stood beside Lloyd's parents, arms held neatly behind his back, brow furrowed. So that's why Lloyd had asked for a solid iron shovel. He hadn't thought Lloyd actually intended to use it in the duel. At the time, it seemed like a strange request. To his left, Baron Frontera let out a horrified sigh and covered his face with one hand. His son had somehow ended up in a formal duel and was treating it like a circus act. But Javier's gaze didn't waver. This wasn't a joke, not to Lloyd. A month of relentless training, not one complaint. Days spent mentoring engineers on underfloor heating, and nights spent learning sword techniques directly from Javier. The progress had been real. Those weren't the actions of someone who took this situation lightly. Arcos called for the duel to begin. Neumann took his stance, feet set, sword steady, eyes locked on his opponent. Across from him, Lloyd shifted into position too. But whatever he was doing, it didn't look like any stance a swordsman should be taking. It was awkward, off balance, strange. Javier narrowed his eyes. That wasn't a stance. That was just standing there. Neumann dashed forward. His voice rang out, demanding to know if Lloyd was even taking this seriously. Lloyd braced himself, knees bent, shovel lowered, a flicker of focus in his eyes. Steel clashed. He parried the blow. Gasps rippled through the stands. Javier blinked. Even Arcos looked stunned. He'd actually blocked it. Neumann's brow twitched. That had to be luck. He swung again. Clang. Lloyd blocked it clean. Javier's expression shifted. His eyes widened. He wasn't imagining it. Lloyd actually looked competent out there, with a shovel. Neumann's expression tightened. His confidence wavered. Lloyd grinned. This wasn't all that unfamiliar. Back during military service, there had been bayonet drills. The stance was different, sure, but the principle wasn't far off. He lunged. The shovel shot forward like a spear. Neumann barely twisted out of the way. Lloyd adjusted his grip. The weight felt good. The scoop was wide enough to deflect a blade, and the tip was sharp enough to break roots. It wasn't just a tool, it was versatile. Then, with no warning, he jammed the shovel into the dirt, stepped on the back of the scoop, and started bouncing, like a pogo stick, cackling as he bounced in place. He waved at Neumann to come closer. From the stands, Javier stared. What was he doing? Neumann hesitated for a moment, still confused, then charged again. Lloyd dropped back to the ground, landing lightly. The grin vanished. His stance returned. Knees bent, shovel pointed forward. He was ready now. His grip was steady, his stance held, and Neumann was coming fast. Steel met iron, again and again, but this time Lloyd didn't just block, he advanced. Each strike he deflected pushed Neumann back a step, then another, and another. Neumann's eyes narrowed. He grit his teeth. This didn't make sense. Why was he being forced back? Lloyd's thoughts stayed sharp. He had his shovel, he had his training, and he had something else. A glowing panel flickered into view. Shoveling. Level 1. A passive skill. While wielding a shovel, all of his physical stats received a boost. All thanks to Javier. That one point had come after a grueling training session, the moment Javier finally acknowledged his effort. Then more had followed, from his parents. The first time they'd seen their son train seriously, the first time they believed he was actually trying. Each point hard-earned, each one a small step forward. It had been enough to unlock the skill, and now he was using it. Neumann couldn't believe it. He was being pushed back by Lloyd, with a shovel. He grit his teeth. Fine. If that's how it was going to be, then it was time to stop holding back. A soft glow began to rise from his body. Mana wrapped around him, his sword lit faintly in his hands. From the stands, Javier's eyes narrowed. He recognised it, that flow, that stance. Neumann was channeling Mana Heart. To his left, Lloyd's father leaned forward, his expression tightening. Neumann's grip shifted. He called out to Lloyd. They were only just getting started. He burst forward, faster, sharper. A sudden blur across the arena. Javier watched, tense. To channel Mana Heart took years of focused training. There was no way a normal fighter could block that. But today, Neumann wasn't fighting a normie. Neumann closed the distance in an instant. His sword came down, aiming to cut straight through the shovel and take Lloyd's head with it. In the stands, his parents gasped. Clang! Lloyd blocked it. The blade didn't cut through, it didn't even push him back. Neumann flinched. His legs felt heavier. His grip weakened. Something was wrong. He stumbled, struggling to keep his balance. What was happening? Why did his body feel so drained? Lloyd didn't say a word, but a grin slowly crept across his face. His fourth card had just been played, the Asrahan core technique. Neumann recoiled. His eyes widened as the realization hit. Lloyd had just absorbed his mana, but Lloyd was already moving in. He stepped forward, eyes locked on target, shovel in hand. Then he swung. The shovel struck him in the side of the head. A tooth flew through the air. Neumann saw it mid-spin. He stared at it in disbelief, realizing it was his. Before he could react, the handle of the shovel caught him under the chin. His head snapped back. He staggered, struggling to stay upright. Lloyd moved in. He raised the shovel and slammed it down. The flat of the blade crashed into the back of Neumann's head, driving him face first into the dirt. Silence swept through the crowd. No one moved. No one spoke. All eyes were on the man with the shovel. The arena stayed quiet. Even Arcos was speechless, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. Then a voice rang out from somewhere in the crowd. Master Lloyd! Actually won! Others joined in. Shocked whispers turned to scattered shouting. Some in disbelief. Some in awe. Did the sword expert just lose to that scumbag? Arcos blinked hard, trying to compose himself. He cleared his throat and raised his voice. He declared it official. Lloyd Frontera had won the duel. Lloyd walked over to where Neumann lay face down in the dirt. He looked down at him. The duel might be over, but he still deserved more punishment. He raised the shovel again. Up in the stands, his father jumped to his feet, shouting that the duel was finished, but Lloyd wasn't listening. The shovel came down. Once, then again. Neumann curled into a ball, shielding his head. Lloyd kept swinging, striking him like some crazed villain. His father shouted again, louder this time, demanding that he stop. Two of the soldiers tried to restrain Lloyd. They told him the duel was over. Byron watched from the sidelines. Was Lloyd losing his mind? Javier didn't think so. Lloyd wouldn't break down like this. He was planning something again. Lloyd finally gave in. He told the soldiers he would stop. They sighed in relief and let go of him. Lloyd closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Then, out of nowhere, he started hitting again. The soldiers rushed to restrain him, but Lloyd didn't give up. Javier stared. This wasn't a man driven by blind rage. Lloyd's movements were calm, deliberate. He was targeting every part of Neumann's body like he was handing out punishment. Not random, not excessive, intentional. There was something behind this. Javier thought back to a conversation they had. Lloyd had asked him to teach the Asrahan technique. That alone had been a surprise. Javier hadn't told a soul about it. He'd only been experimenting with it privately. Lloyd claimed Javier had talked about the technique in his sleep. Javier hadn't believed a word of it, and yet Lloyd had known exactly how to improve it. He'd even helped Javier perfect it, on the first try. He also told him he could beat Neumann, and he had. Easily. Javier's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp voice calling out. It was Arcos. He was shouting at Lloyd to stop disgracing the knight's honour. Lloyd froze. He looked up at his father and caught his breath. Then he asked what honour he was talking about. He told Arcos to look under the tablecloth and then tell him again about this so-called honour. Arcos lifted the cloth and found a stack of letters hidden beneath it. He opened one. His eyes widened in shock. Lloyd explained. The letters were between Neumann and Tordes, the man who had swindled him in a real estate scheme. Inside were full financial records, forged documents, and details of their plan. Arcos's hands trembled as he read. The evidence was undeniable. Neumann remained on his knees, staring in silent shock. Those documents were supposed to be hidden. How had they ended up here? Lloyd looked at him. He knew exactly what Neumann was thinking. How did he find them? The answer was simple. In the novel, Javier eventually discovered the hiding spot. So Lloyd had sent Podong to retrieve them the night before. Arcos slumped into his chair, still in disbelief. A cold stare settled on his face. Lloyd thought his father was too kind. Another leader would be demanding Neumann's head right now. His father was a good man. But good men don't always make the best leaders. Lloyd spoke up. He turned to his father and asked if he could suggest a punishment. Arcos said he was listening. Lloyd proposed they drop a mouse on Neumann's head. If he's hurt, exile him. If not, just demote him. The crowd stirred. What kind of punishment was that? Who gets hurt by a mouse? Arcos wondered if Lloyd was going easy on him, hoping he might reflect and repent. Bayon remarked he was glad they were giving Neumann a chance to change. Arcos agreed. Lloyd could proceed as suggested. He asked if Neumann had any objections. Neumann agreed. He thanked the Lord for his mercy. Lloyd looked at the man. If you go too easy on criminals, would they really change? Not a chance. They'd just take it as weakness and try again, knowing the consequences wouldn't be that bad. And sure enough, Neumann was already grinning. He was certain the Baron would regret this. That he'd get his revenge. That he'd deal with the son too. Lloyd told him he must be happy, smiling like that. But not to worry. This would be the last time. Neumann looked up at him unnerved. What did he mean by that? Lloyd glanced at Podong on his shoulder and handed him a red seed. He told Neumann he'd find out soon enough. Then he tossed Podong into the air. Lloyd glared at him. He wasn't letting him off that easy. A flash of light burst overhead. Podong began to grow. The tiny creature expanded into a towering beast 30 feet tall. The crowd gasped as Lloyd ran for cover. Neumann remained frozen, staring up at the giant hamster as it fell toward him. A cloud of dust exploded behind Lloyd in the place where Neumann had been. Lloyd glanced back at the impact site. A crater now marked the spot, with Podong lying flat at the centre of it. What a shame, he said. Looks like it's exile then. He smirked. And that's how you take out the trash. Some time later, out in the village, Podong was cheerfully digging a long trench that stretched straight through the heart of the village. His powerful limbs tore through the ground with ease, leaving a clean path behind him. Lloyd and Javier stood off to the side, quietly watching the giant hamster work. Javier turned to Lloyd and asked what Sir Podong was doing. Lloyd explained that he was carving out a road for the village. He looked satisfied. Things were finally turning around. The soldiers who had once lounged around like freeloaders now moved like real construction workers, focused, sweating, and strong from the labour. He thought back to an ancient city he had read about in his old life. Rome. A place known for its vast network of roads. One of the most famous was called the Appian Way, and the method they used to build it was the same method he planned to use here. The road would begin at the manor and end at the base of the eastern mountain. Javier asked why he was building a road. Lloyd told him to wait and see. With a grin on his face, he said he was going to put this land on the map, and walked away with his shovel resting on his shoulder. Javier stopped him with a question. Where had he gained the knowledge to do all this? First the heated floors, then a giant hamster, and now a road? His expression grew serious. Then he asked if Lloyd was really Lloyd Frontera. The system chimed, warning Lloyd that Javier was becoming suspicious of his identity. Lloyd stared at him. If Javier thought he had stolen Lloyd Frontera's body, would he cut him down? Probably would. Lloyd took a breath and reminded himself. He had a plan for this exact moment. His eyes narrowed as he glared at Javier, looking deliberately obnoxious. He said he'd been studying while no one was looking. Was that not allowed? The system chimed again. Special skill activated. Stubborn insistence has been triggered. Javier sighed. From what he'd seen, all Lloyd did when no one was looking was drink. Lloyd fired back. Had Javier been watching him 24 hours a day? Of course not. He could be reading before bed, or even while taking a dump. Javier had no idea what he did with all his time. Javier asked him to explain the giant hamster. Even a skilled mage with 20 years of training would struggle with summoning magic like that. Lloyd fired back. Look at Javier himself. How could a guy in his 20s be that good at using his mana core without a teacher? Was he a genius or something? Javier started to respond, but Lloyd cut him off. If Javier could be a genius, why couldn't he? Maybe he was just born with a gift for summoning. Javier had no response. He was completely defeated. Lloyd picked up his shovel and rested it on his shoulder as he turned to leave. If that was all, he said, he had to get back to work. As he walked away, he wondered if Javier had believed any of what he just told him. He spotted Sabayan overseeing the workers and asked him to take over while he stepped away. Bayan nodded and said he'd handle it. Javier followed behind and asked if he could accompany him, since it was his duty to watch over him. Lloyd replied that of course he could. What a silly question. Javier then asked where they were going. Lloyd told him the destination was a fair distance away, but he had to go. There was money that had been stolen from the land, and he intended to get it back. We moved to a small border town named Ludinia. Inside a dimly lit room at a local inn, a man slammed his fist on the table. It was Tordes, and he was furious. How could they have lost so much money? Were they cheated? A second man stood nearby, calm and unimpressed. He told him that's how gambling worked. You win some, you lose some. Then he added, if Tordes couldn't pay for his protection anymore, he'd be taking his leave. A flash of panic crossed Tordes' face. He told the man he could get the money, he just needed more time. He couldn't leave him like this. The bodyguard gave a cold shrug. He said he'd stay, for now. But the moment the money stopped, he'd be gone. Tordes slumped forward, resting his head on his hand. He just needed to lie low for a while. Word was, someone was already looking for him. If he stayed quiet, maybe they'd give up. Then he could find another easy mark and earn it all back. A sudden bang shook the room as the door burst open with a violent kick. Lloyd stepped inside. His tone was casual as he said it sounded like they were talking about him. Tordes jumped to his feet, demanding to know who he was. Lloyd paused, then smiled. Of course, they didn't even know what he looked like. He grinned wider, then said his name clearly. Lloyd Frontera. Sound familiar? Tordes froze, his mouth hanging open in shock. The bodyguard stepped forward and asked if he should kill him. Tordes snapped out of it, panicking. He told the man they had to run, now. The bodyguard grabbed Tordes and crouched low. Energy gathered at his feet, air swirling around him like a small vortex. With a blast of wind, he launched them through the window. Tordes clutched under one arm. They landed smoothly outside, the air softening the impact. Then he looked up and saw someone standing in their path. Javier. Sword raised, steady at his shoulder. He stepped forward and drew a clean line through the air with his blade, calm but ready. He told the bodyguard to leave Tordes behind and walk away. If he didn't, he'd be treated as an accomplice. Javier watched them closely. Lloyd had been right. They tried to escape through the back window. The bodyguard scoffed. He looked Javier up and down and asked if he was even old enough to know how to use that sword he was holding. He raised his hand and a crimson sphere of energy began to form in his palm. Watching from the broken window above, Lloyd remembered how it played out in the novel. After his master's death, Javier had hunted these two down. This was where he first fought a dark enchanter. He'd struggled then. Gravitational magic had nearly overwhelmed him. Lloyd smiled to himself. In the novel, that is. This time was different. The bodyguard fired the crimson blast straight at Javier. Javier raised his sword to block, but the moment it made contact, the orb expanded, swelling outward into a glowing sphere that swallowed him whole. Pressure hit him instantly. The gravitational magic forced him down, grinding his feet into the dirt, but he held firm. His stance tightened. He didn't fold under the weight, not this time. From the window, Lloyd watched. In the novel, Javier had been just a high-level swordsman, but now his mana core was stronger. Javier let out a breath, then slashed outward with his sword. The energy surrounding him split open on contact and dissipated instantly. Javier looked up, surprised. He'd never seen magic like that before, but it hadn't stopped him. The bodyguard stood frozen, not understanding what had just happened. Then he backed off, eyes narrowing. He knew he was no match for this. Without another word, he launched himself into the air, leaving Tordes behind. As he flew, he shouted that their contract was over. Javier stepped toward Tordes, sword still in hand. He told him he was in serious trouble. Committing fraud against a noble family was a grave crime. Tordes backed away, stumbling until he fell to the ground. He tried to scramble back, but Javier kept advancing. He told Tordes he'd cut off both his legs and make him crawl to the courthouse. He raised his sword high. Tordes screamed. Then a voice cut in, sharp and firm. Lloyd. He stepped between them, arms outstretched, shielding Tordes with his body. He told Javier to calm down. If he went through with it, they'd chop his head off in court. Javier froze, staring at Lloyd in disbelief. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Lloyd was actually thinking of someone other than himself. Back in Tordes' room at the inn, he sat tied to a chair, trembling. Across from him, Lloyd leaned back, casually smiling. He told Tordes not to worry. Everyone got a little greedy sometimes. And honestly, chopping off someone's head over a bit of thievery felt a little harsh. Tordes stammered. So, he was forgiven? Lloyd let out a light laugh. Of course. They weren't taking him to court. He must be grateful, right? Grateful enough to hand over the rest of the Baron's assets. Tordes nodded quickly, stuttering as he said he'd gladly do it, if that meant everything would be forgiven. Lloyd smiled again, eyes sharp. That was the bare minimum. They were only just getting started. Lloyd's smile didn't fade. If Tordes wanted forgiveness, he'd have to do more. Tordes swallowed hard and asked what he needed to do. Whatever it was, he'd obey. Lloyd slid a sheet of paper across the table. Just a simple contract, he said. Everything would be settled once he signed it. Tordes looked down. What kind of contract was this? Lloyd told him it was an employment contract, with a salary, of course. He grinned and added that he'd be keeping 80% of that salary to pay back the debt. Tordes looked crushed, but he didn't argue. Lloyd told him not to worry, he could pay off the debt in full. In, say, 500 years. Tordes stared at him, stunned. Across the room, Javier looked just as stunned. He hadn't expected Lloyd to forgive him so easily, but this? Lloyd grinned again. There was no way he'd kill someone who owed his family that much money. That would be a waste. He'd bleed him dry for the rest of his life. Tordes muttered that he'd never seen such an unjust contract. Lloyd blinked at him, wide-eyed, like the deal made perfect sense. He said Tordes didn't have to sign. The smile dropped, replaced with a cold, threatening stare. They could always take it to court instead. He grabbed the pen and signed without a second thought. He knew they'd have his head if he didn't. The following day, Lloyd, Javier, and Tordes set off in a wagon headed back toward the Frontera barony. As they rolled down the worn path, Javier spoke up. He told Lloyd they'd managed to recover enough money to hold off loan payments for the next few months. Lloyd nodded but said he had no intention of sitting on that money. 30 soldiers weren't enough. He needed to hire more men. But that brought another problem to mind. How was he supposed to convince anyone to work for him with the terrible reputation he had? A few days later, back at the Frontera barony, Lloyd has set up a notice advertising new job openings. A line has already formed, and at the front sits Lloyd at a desk, looking genuinely confused. He turns to Javier and asks why there are so many applicants. Don't the people despise him? Javier responds, they did, but not anymore. Lloyd has proven himself. He delivered the heated floors on time, dealt with a traitor, and can even perform impressive summoning magic. Now people see him as a trustworthy, capable man. Lloyd blinks, stunned. He didn't expect this. At the front of the line, a man politely calls out to get Lloyd's attention. Lloyd snaps out of his thoughts and gestures for him to sign the contract. But before doing so, the man insists on expressing his gratitude. He explains that his child used to catch severe colds whenever the weather turned harsh. But this year, thanks to the heated homes, they haven't had to worry. His smile beams with relief. He bows deeply, full of gratitude and respect. Lloyd freezes, unsure how to react. This has never happened before. He stutters, barely getting the words out, telling the man he's glad for him and his family. But in the back of his mind, he's uneasy. All he'd wanted was enough coin to keep the barony afloat. Sitting here now, he feels a little embarrassed. Before signing, the man mentions something else. He explains that he has a relative in a neighbouring territory who heard about the heated floors, and wants one too. He asks if it's possible to order one on their behalf. Lloyd's mind starts racing. Finally, the moment he's been waiting for. A grin spreads across his face, eyes glinting with opportunity. Of course, he says, it's no problem at all. But he'll have to charge extra for travel. Javier, standing nearby, watches him with an unimpressed look. That scheming expression he knows too well. He wonders if this has all been part of Lloyd's long-term plan. But something else keeps nagging at him. Why is Lloyd building that road? Later, Lloyd and Javier stand on a hill overlooking the village. In the distance, the mountains stretch wide. Lloyd points toward them and says, those mountains will be stripped soon enough. Javier turns to him confused. What does he mean? Lloyd explains that the heating system he designed needs fuel, and wood won't be enough in the long run. There's a flicker of concern in Javier's eyes. If Lloyd knew that, then why build so many in the first place? Lloyd tells him that's why he's building the road. At the end of it lies a coal mine. His face twists into that greedy grin Javier knows all too well. They'll sell the coal at a huge markup. The people have heated floors now, there's no going back. But of course, he'll give the locals a small discount. Javier scowls, his face full of disgust. Lloyd is as devious as ever. Lloyd glances at Javier and asks if he thinks he's being a scumbag again. Does he really believe they can repay their debts without taking advantage of the mines? Javier doesn't respond right away. He looks out toward the mountains, thinking it over. He admits that, for now, this might be the only way to keep the barony afloat. But then he adds, others have tried to mine that place before. The rock is unstable. It always collapses. Lloyd waves him off without worry. He already knows that. That's why he's going to use a secret technique to handle it. The shield tunnelling method. He raises his shovel high over his head and declares they've got no time to waste. There's still a mountain to break. Javier watches him walk off with a spring in his step, wondering where on earth he learns these things. But for now, he'll trust him. His lord has a plan. That's enough. Far from the village near the base of the mountain, the entrance to the coal mine lies in ruins, collapsed under broken beams and fallen rock. But deep inside the darkness, something stirs. A set of large antennae twitches. Glowing red eyes pierce through the black. An entire colony of giant ants crawls just beneath the surface, lurking, waiting. They wait below, unseen, but for how long?